We're ready to start this meeting of the Board of Selectmen for January 28th, and I'm happy to announce that Selectman Benka, who recently underwent some surgery, is doing well. Does anyone have any announcements?
No announcements today. February 18th, you got.
Oh, yes, okay. I have an announcement. This board will not be meeting on February 18th, which is school vacation week, so we will not be meeting during that week. Any updates on committees or anything?
Nothing to report.
I do know that the Selectmen's Override Study Committee, or the Joint Committee, I guess, of the School Committee and the Selectmen, held a public hearing on Wednesday, and it was very well attended. A lot of passionate speakers on a number of issues, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more from that when Selectman Benka gets back with us. Okay, Arthur Conquest had signed up for public comment. I don't see him here. We'll start with I think we're a minute early, so we'll start with the calendar and we can get back to him if he shows up. All right, the first item is the minutes of January 21st. I gave Kate some corrections. Anybody else have any additions or corrections?
I gave Kate my corrections as well.
Okay.
I don't have any now.
Okay. Okay. All right, then I'll move those minutes of January 21st as amended. All in favor, Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye. Now we have an amended lease agreement with Temple Emeth, and I see Mr. Buchheit is here if anyone has any questions. Just to bring people up to date, as you know, we have a great many school-age children now and preschool-age children, and so the school department has been searching for spaces in addition to our schools in order to house everybody, and so they're moving some of the BEEP programs, that's the Brookline Early Education Programs, preschool, to several locations, and this particular lease in front of us is for some space at Temple Emeth. Were there any questions about that?
You know what, I do have one question I forgot to ask earlier.
Okay, well, I'll ask
John.
Mr. Buchheit to come over to the microphone.
There was another new term in there that I forgot about. It was something to do with the renovation of the bathrooms. Would you go over that with me, please? It sounds like those bathrooms have already been renovated, but we're going to be reimbursing the Temple for it?
No, that's, so originally the second floor, that we're leasing next year had no bathrooms. And we sent out an RFP about a year ago, and in that proposal to lease the second floor that was submitted by the Temple, there was a requirement that the town pay a portion of the costs of building out bathrooms for the second floor, which is a requirement of the schools. I think you have to have the bathrooms need to be proximate to the classrooms, and they couldn't be on a separate floor. So that is why in the amended lease, the town is paying for 80% of the cost of putting in new bathrooms on the second floor.
Okay. But did I read it wrong then? Was that work already done, or that work is going to be done?
In the earlier lease, the town paid I think $2,500, a very small amount, to rough in some pipes so that could be done, because we strongly believe that we were going to try and work out this deal. So we had roughed in some piping, and that was covered, I think, with the original lease.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
No. Good.
Oh, okay, I'm going to move favorable action then on approving and executing an amended lease agreement with Temple Emeth. All in favor? Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye. Thank you, Mr. Buchheit.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go back. I see Mr. Conquest is here. You have 3 minutes to make your public comment.
Sorry.
No, we started a minute or two early, so
Okay,
you're fine.
Someone told me to be here at 7 o'clock, and I was here like 1 after. You should make more parking spaces available in the parking lot. I'm joking, aren't I?
We should make more parking spaces all over town. I'm sure there are.
Good evening, Arthur Conquest, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 6. I had a discussion with Selectman Goldstein about 10 days ago, and then I also about my being appointed to the Human Relations Youth Resource Commission. And then I also had a discussion with you, Selectman Daley, when I was interviewed about the term house servant. And I want to just read a little small piece, not so much that I've written. It comes from the New Yorker magazine, which
Okay.
is a fairly reputable, periodical. It actually is commenting on a group of pacifists that raided the FBI headquarters in Philadelphia, and someone's just written a book about that in terms of finding the files that they stole from the FBI headquarters, and this book has been written. But I want to read you something that was written about that. Choosing the night of the Muhammad Ali Joe Frazier heavyweight championship bout for the break-in, the burglars counted on most people being distracted, their TVs turned up loud, including those who lived in the building that housed the FBI office. They got away with suitcases full of the files. At the farmhouse where Davison and his gang of pacifists met to examine their haul, one of the first documents they read instructed agents to, quote, enhance the paranoia, unquote, by dogging students and anti-war activists, and to, quote, get the point across, there is an FBI agent behind every mailbox, unquote. Other files, which they began releasing to reporters, showed that Hoover's FBI had a twisted ID fixé about African Americans. Its aim to put spies in every black student union at every college in the country, quote, without regard for whether there had been disturbances on such campuses, and had largely achieved that goal. As, this is the writer, McGregor writes, the overall impression the files gave was that Hoover and many other FBI officials thought of black Americans as falling into two categories: black people who should be spied on by the FBI, and black people who should spy on other black people for the FBI. Now, I'm also going to just share with you, and I won't read it, but this is a book. It's called The FBI Martin Luther King. You can get it at the library. I just happened to get a copy 20 years ago for 98 cents at the New England Bookmobile. Chapter 5 talks about a black man who was paid by the FBI $48 a month to inform them on every single thing that Dr. King did, from the money he collected to where he was having his meetings, okay, to who he met with, and so on and so forth. He ultimately was at the scene when Dr. King was assassinated. That's the last time that he was seen. That's who, not necessarily the email that I wrote, but that's who I identify as being house servants, people who do things, okay, for the benefit of no other group, no other racial group in America is asked to do what we do. And if you look at, I'm going to say freedom fighters like Geronimo Pratt, who was fingered and put in jail for 27 years by another black man, he just made up a story. If you look at Fred Hampton in Chicago, who was killed by the Chicago police and the FBI, okay? And another black man described for them where he lives, where he slept, and so on and so forth. That's what I'm talking about. Okay? Does everybody understand what I'm saying? Okay?
I think we do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and the next thing is a contract for $35,695 with Nagel Engineering of Danvers, Pierce School electrical upgrades. Mr. Quigley.
Yes, good evening. This is a contract with Nagel Engineering Incorporated for design services for the Pierce School electrical upgrades, including, it's the panel boards, load centers, and switch gear, and new emergency power system. And if approved, the goal would be to get the construction work done this summer.
Okay, any questions about this?
No question.
All right, I'll move favorable action then on the contract for $35,695 with Ningle Engineering, Inc. All in favor, Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye. Thank you, Mr. Goodley. Are you here on the next one?
The next two.
Okay, so the next one is contract amendment number 1 for $1,188.
Yes.
With some consulting engineers, Garcia Galusca de Souza, for life safety improvements at Fire Station 1 and 4.
Yes, this is connected to Fire Station 1 in particular. It's a hydrant flow test and report, 8-hour test to make sure we have the right water pressure for the new fire suppression system that's planned for that building. So if approved, that's for $1,188 to Garcia, Galusca, and D'Souza Consulting Engineers.
I always thought the firefighters tested the hydrants themselves. I know I've seen them in my neighborhood, kind of.
This is for the water pressure in the street, not the hydrant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Nope.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and tell us about the next one? We can put the
Alrighty.
two together.
The next one is contract amendment number 5 in the amount of $31,500 for work to be completed by Desmond Associates. This is Town Hall Garage repairs Phase 4, and hopefully it's the final phase of that project.
Yeah, I know, we've
Multi-year
been seeing this
project.
for years.
Yes, yes. Well, the work has had to be broken up into smaller parcels for various reasons over the years, so. And this is for design, bidding assistance, and construction administration.
And this is waterproofing the area right outside of the Pierce School, that sort of
This is
deck
for.
area, is that right?
This, where we would be working now is the areas of the building that are facing the school street side and also the service drive in between the school and the library, because the garage is under those areas too, and it leaks in those areas as well.
Okay.
And it's also for a new handicap ramp at the rear of the Pierce Primary School, because the existing one is in disrepair and it is not compliant.
Okay. Questions?
Yeah, maybe I misunderstand, but this is for a change in the contract, right? Or is this just for Phase 4? Or is this an
It's
addition?
both. It's for a
So what's
change.
the additional part is my question. What's in this contract that wasn't previously anticipated?
Well, the part of this part of the work was originally going to be done in the summer of 13. But for various reasons, we couldn't do that because for one thing, the auditorium work was going on. And we couldn't do both at the same time because it was just not physically possible. So the biggest thing for this is to move it to, it's mostly for adding another phase to the architect's work.
So did we get a credit from the last phase for not doing this work
No.
in the summer of 13?
No, we wouldn't get a credit for that because this is a whole, I mean, it's not, they have to come back for a whole nother summer and do construction administration. They have to complete the design for this. We have to rebid the whole thing again. So no, we didn't get a credit.
So this is costing us $31,000 more because it didn't
Happened
fit-
last year.
It didn't fit into our schedule last.
That's right.
You mean
Okay.
we
That's what-
actually paid for it already? And
No, we didn't pay for this.
We didn't pay for it, okay.
This is for, we did not anticipate the architect crafting another set of bid documents, the architect, doing a whole nother set of construction administration, reviewing submittals, and also for the extended survey in that area. We didn't pay for this.
We didn't pay for it. I thought you said we,
This is for moving the work to this summer.
yeah.
That cost them money.
But if we had done it last summer, it would have been included in
Yes.
the contract.
So it's really just for the management involved, not for the labor and materials involved in the previous.
Well, there is labor and materials. They have to come, in other words, it's costing them to come back this summer. You know, it's not, this is,
I think what the question is, though, this is for the design portion of the work, and we're still going to have another bill coming for the actual work?
yes, for the construction work.
Okay.
When we bid the project, we'll have another contract for that.
And
At
I
least-
think
Well,
that
we didn't pay for that,
we didn't pay for that
for that
already.
work, as you say.
Oh, I'm
Last
sorry, I
stop
thought you were referring to the design. No, I mean, no, we're gonna have to bid the whole Phase 4 again, but that was not part of, we never bid that part of the work.
Okay, that's.
So this is additional to what we've already,
That's right.
We're paying something additional for design work at this point, but we're not paying anything additional for labor and materials.
No, we're gonna rebid that Phase 4 altogether. We didn't, that was not ever included, the actual construction work, in any of the bids to date.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood you.
yeah.
Well, I mean, what was confusing to me was it was a contract amendment. We were amending a previous thing, when usually that's a change order and that's something additional, but yet it was Phase 4, which to me said it's a brand-new contract, but now you've clarified why that.
Right, it'll be a brand-new construction contract.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you.
Okay, are we clear now?
I'm clear on it
Okay.
now, thank you.
Any questions? No. Okay, I'm going to move the last two contracts that we just discussed, 1,188 for Garcia Galusca de Souza for life safety improvements at fire stations 1 and 4, and 31,500 for work to be completed by Desmond Associates in connection with the Town Hall Garage Repair Project. All in favor? Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye. Thank you, Mr. Ridley.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now we have a Chapter 90 reimbursement. Reconstruction of Princeton Road and Rangeley Road, Chapter 90 is money we get from the state when we do highway projects.
That's exactly right. These streets were completed last year, and it was one of our more successful projects. We completed within budget and on time, and this is the
Is there
final.
music to our ears?
And this is the final piece of paperwork that has to be executed, so it's
So the whole thing was for $569,000, and this is for $46,398.71. So this is just we've already been reimbursed for most of it? Is
Yes.
that- And this is
Yep.
just the last piece?
This is the final reimbursement request, and this will close the chapter on this one.
Okay, questions?
No questions.
All right. I will move favorable action then on approving and executing a Chapter 90 reimbursement request in the amount of $46,398.71 from the Mass Department of Transportation Highway for reconstruction of Princeton and Rangeley roads. All in favor, Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
I'll vote aye. It's unanimous. And are you here on NSTAR?
Yes, I am.
Okay, this is installing poles and a power line for the new maintenance facility at Putterham Golf Course.
Correct.
So tell us about that.
Sure. This is an agreement, standard agreement from M-Star that allows them to set poles and string wires to get power to what will be the maintenance facility for the Putnam Meadows Golf Course.
So I noticed, though, it says that in the event the company, meaning NSTAR, is required to relocate said pole or any related equipment due to the request or direction of anyone on our side, we would reimburse them for the costs. But I don't see, so is there no cost for this unless we ask them to move a pole? I didn't,
No, there is. If you look on that, there's a work order number on that. And I think it's in the
Okay.
upper right-hand corner.
Yeah, I see it,
So what they do is we request a service
yeah.
to this building. They work up an estimate, and then they put a work order to it. So this is the next step in the process.
Well, I guess what I was wondering is, what is the estimate? Because I don't see it
No,
anywhere on this
it isn't
paper.
there, because that was actually initiated from the building department. And I believe that work order was somewhere between $7,000
Okay.
and $9,000.
How sure are you of that?
Not
Are we in the
very.
right ballpark or not?
Yeah. I mean, it's in that range.
Okay. Questions?
No questions.
All right. I will move favorable action on this, but I ask you to come back to us if it turns out to be that is not, if it's not more or less in that range.
Sure.
You know, if it's way outside of those parameters.
Yep.
Please come back to us. So I'll move favorable action on approving and executing a license agreement with NSTAR to install poles and power lines for the new maintenance facility at Putterham Golf Course. Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
And I will vote aye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Then we have a temporary wine and malt beverage license to Vine Ripe Grill for events at 1281 West Roxbury Parkway. February 1st, a birthday party. February 2nd, a baptism. I'll move favorable action on those. All in favor? Selectman Goldstein?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky? And I'll vote aye. So now we're moving to the main calendar. And we have some candidates for interviews. So Information Technology, K.M. Peterson. Come on up to the microphone. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you for
evening.
coming. So, Mr. Peterson, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in the Information Technology Advisory Committee?
I've been a resident of the town since 1983, and I'm currently in the process of changing my focus in IT, so I've been taking time to explore some different technologies that I hadn't done before, and also looking to do some volunteer work. So I was attracted by the opportunity to do some work that might help the town that I've lived in.
Great, okay. Well, I will turn this over to Selectman Waschinsky, because I'm a low-tech kind of a person, and he's an IT guy.
So I notice you have a bachelor's in philosophy. How do you go from philosophy to technology?
I actually sort of did the opposite. I wound up in Boston at Boston University as an engineering student, and realized that I might have what it takes to be an engineer, but I didn't have enough of a focus and interest to get through engineering school. So I left school when I was 19 years old. I worked for several years, and then I decided I wanted to go back and get something that was going to make me a better person as opposed to a better employee for somebody. And I chose philosophy since it seemed like one of the most general things one could study if you were interested in how things sort of fit together.
So I guess probably more on point. How do you think you can help us, and do you have any ideas on some directions, improvements we can make?
Well, personally, I prefer to listen and hear what people have to say about the problems that they're encountering. I'm very focused on the end users of technology. Most of IT these days is really about how do we sort of run the systems, and how do we do, how do we put processes together to run the business. And what I'm really interested in is helping the productivity of the people that are actually doing the work most of the time. So I understand there are always opportunities to improve things, and I also have the expectation that in the town the budgets are not what they are in many enterprises, private enterprises. So my focus is, as I said, not on helping individual end users, but also these days IT is changing so much. So two things that are happening: the outsourcing of many services. And there's a great deal of discussion about the cloud, for example. I've done work with cloud technology. I'm aware of the benefits and the limitations of it, because there certainly are plenty of both. So that's a particular interest. The second thing is that lots of things are going mobile these days. I have the Town of Brookline app on my phone. I occasionally shoot pictures of things and send them in, and Once in a while, I even get a response that something's been looked at, although normally that doesn't happen. But that's my, you know.
Which department are you sending them to?
Well, I
You're
don't
not getting
know.
responses?
That's the problem. I tend to find things that don't fit into the categories very well.
Oh, I see, okay.
So, you know, there's lots to be done. I think that empowering individuals, the people who are really doing the work, is really important. And so, educating people and paying attention to how technology affects people, and trying to figure out how to do it without breaking the bank.
Ken?
So I'm intrigued, I use the Brook Online program, I've had good responses. What kinds of things don't fit into the categories so far?
Well, I can give you two examples. One is by the CVS at Cypress and Washington Street. There is a dip in the pavement, which I would call a pothole, but doesn't really seem like a pothole. If you're a pedestrian walking along Cypress Street and it's been raining, you tend to get soaked if cars drive by this particular area. So that's one thing I've done a couple times, I've sent a couple times. But is it a pothole or not? The other is the bicycle lane on Park Street near Beacon. There was counter lane striping installed there, but there was still a big sign up that said one-way, do not enter. And some of us actually will look at a do not enter sign before we look at the lines on the road. So that was another thing I had done. I had taken a picture and, you know, sent it in and said, is this really done yet? And a week or two later, they did in fact put signs up under the one-way signs that said accept bikes. So it's great.
But you didn't get a response.
I didn't get a response.
Oh,
It's great
no,
if
but-
things.
But getting your thing fixed is kind of a,
Maybe it would have
Yeah.
been
Good
fixed
response.
anyway, sure.
I think I'm
Right,
going
good
to, I'm
customer
going to
service.
suggest that you've got a technology problem. If you photographed your so-called pothole from some different angles, you might get it so it looks a little more like a
What I
pothole.
actually tried to do was get a car going through it with the spray going up, but there wasn't a
An
hapless
action
pedestrian
photo, yeah.
in the shot, so maybe it just didn't go. But, you know, it's really hard these days. You know, with Amazon, we have frictionless commerce. It's so easy to put complaints in, and I expect that the people that get these things are kind of overwhelmed sometimes. So in some sense, it's understandable. But people do expect responses, especially when it's the town.
Well, any other questions?
No.
Well, thank you very much for coming in and applying. I will tell you that there are a couple of incumbents who are up this year. There also is one vacancy, and you're obviously qualified, but we've had, I think, 3 new people apply.
Well, that's
So-
terrific. I
so
mean,
it's-
that's a very good thing. that
But
you have
we
more
do
than one
appreciate
candidate.
your interest, and you know, you may be the one, but if you're not, I urge you to, you know, think about it next year.
Well, thank you very much. I hope you get a good person, and thanks for listening to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, Stuart Silvestri, Parks and Recreation Commission?
Although there's a typo there, it's Stuart, not Steward.
Oh. Like, oh, some more, yes,
Like,
okay. This is like you were wanting to be the steward of the parks.
Yeah, I get that every now and then. A D
Okay.
instead of a T.
So Kate, make sure we get his name correctly spelled in the minutes. So, Mr. Silvestri, tell us about yourself and why you're interested in Parks and Rec.
Well, my wife and I moved to Brookline back in 1992. We lived over in Beacon Street in a rental unit, and we subsequently, back in the 96 or 97, bought a house just across the street here on Thayer Street, and we've raised 3 kids. They've all gone through Pierce. We have 2 at the high school and 1 still at Pierce. And I've got over the years became involved with youth sports in town, and primarily youth baseball, and have been working on that quite a bit over the last several years in trying to improve the overall quality of the baseball and the quality of the fields, which led me to go to to get involved in several of the projects around town, whether it's Fisher Hill or the Warren renovation or the Waldstein renovation, so I sat in on almost all of those meetings. And I know Nancy O'Connor and Jim Carroll fairly well, so it seemed like a natural next step to try to get involved in.
Yeah. So tell us, do you have like improvements you'd like to suggest in terms of how the fields are used for the youth sports and?
Not necessarily improvements, but in several of the meetings, it seems like the youth organizations were not well represented, or not, it wasn't an even balance in.
There was for many years a commissioner who was very involved with youth sports, and he passed away a while ago. But so it is good to have that kind of representation.
Yes, so with the Warren renovation, we had talked about the various things that a baseball field might want to have that that rarely is seen in Brookline, whether it's an outfield fence or a dugout with a roof on it or that sort of thing. And certainly when we travel around Greater Boston, virtually every other town has those kinds of things. Granted, some of them have more space, but not necessarily so. We travel all around the city of Boston, and there's plenty of actual baseball fields, and there are very few, if any, in Brookline that are dedicated baseball fields. They all seem to sort of have to share, which we understand, and that's fine, but we just want to make sure that there's some balance there with the neighbors and the
I'm
youth
going to
sports.
turn this over to Selectman Goldstein, who I know has long been an advocate for youth baseball.
Yeah, and I know Stuart from those discussions, and, there is some activity on the score of trying to find a place where we can build a premier field for baseball in Brookline, youth baseball in Brookline. I haven't heard from you guys in a couple months, so I don't, maybe you can kind of update me on what's going on.
Right, we're trying to, to be honest, we've had a more pressing matter with bringing Little League Baseball back to Brookline, so up until this year, or in the past 30 years, we've had Brookline Youth Baseball, which is an independent baseball organization, very well run, very nice organization, but at the end of the spring season, our kids just went home rather than go off into that Little League tournament, which we see on TV every year. So our kids, when they were young, my son is now a freshman in high school, but when he was in the 4th grade, we would play baseball at Robinson and then come home and watch the Little League World Series on TV, and he and his friends would say, why can't we play in that? And I thought that was a reasonable question, and over the last 5 or 6 years, we've managed to steer baseball towards Little League. So being re-affiliated with Little League has taken all of our time over the last several months. So this spring, we will be actually fielding the first Brookline Little League team in 30 years. So.
Good.
Wow.
And are we still working on our field proposal?
We are still working.
Without going into too many details about it?
Yes.
Because I know
Yep.
it's not ready for prime time yet, but.
Correct. Yes, we are.
Okay. And Stuart, I've known you for a while. I never knew you were on the America's Cup team. That was astounding to me.
So, yeah, I think
That's been amazing.
Yeah, that was fun.
Well, tell us about it.
So, I was part of the team in 1987 that was in Australia, that bringing the America's Cup back to San Diego. So if some of you might remember that in 1983 was the first time the Americans had lost the America's Cup in 132 years in Newport. The team that won was from Perth, which I like to tell my kids is as far away as you can get from Brookline and still be on the planet, because it's clear across the other side of the world. But I was fortunate enough to be a member of that team that went over there and participated in that summer of 1987, which was February of 1987, and was part of the team.
When I see one of those boats, I always think they're beautiful, but they look kind of scary too. So
yeah, it is. It's
to
fun.
sail
The
on.
engineering and science, so for me that was the draw, the science and the engineering aspect of it, and as well as the team orient, the team portion of it. We had 60 to 70 people in the organization and 25 sailors. And we're still quite close today. And that's a lot of what I'm trying to do with baseball in Brookline is and it's less about the baseball, more about the team, trying to put together competitive travel teams where we can wear a Brookline shirt and go to the next town over, whether it's Newton or into the city, and play competitive baseball, because we think that that's important.
Okay, Neil.
The Park and Rec Commission, their purview is, of course, a lot broader than just youth sports.
Sure.
Gets into recreation and passive parks. And do you have views on some of the other areas that Parks and Recs covers?
Well, as a longtime resident here at Emerson Park, I'm certainly familiar with the multi-use aspect of that park and all the parks in town, and it's wonderful how well the town manages all of the different constituencies that want to use their parks, and so I think it's pretty well done at the moment, but at the same time, having been to some of these meetings, it seems like sometimes the youth sports at these, there are very few, I guess there are many parks that have athletic fields and some that do not, but it's with this ever-increasing student population in Brookline, it seems like every park is being looked at as a potential recreation location, I would think.
Any other questions?
No questions for Stuart.
Well, thank you so much for coming in and talking with us. This is a commission, believe it or not, the Parks and Recreation Commission is always one that people want to be on. And we don't have any vacancies at the current time. There are a couple of incumbents who are up for reappointment. And typically, we don't kick them off, but you never know. But I would urge you to, even if you don't make it this round, to stay involved. And, I think you're doing great work with the youth sports, and that's important to have it represented.
Very well, that sounds good.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Dick.
Okay, Planning Board, Linda Hamlin. Welcome.
Thank you.
So tell us how it's going, what you've been working on.
How's it going? Well, let's see, there's CIP tomorrow morning, and then there's Brookline Place next week, and signage, but I don't have to appear because we have Brookline Place on the same hour, so there's a couple things going on. I don't know, I mean, this month, and Hancock Village, I mean, so, yes, there's a few things on the
Let me
plate.
just ask you, because I actually had a citizen call me earlier today with a sort of complaint about their neighbors are trying to do something, and they've been going to all the planning board meetings, and they're sort of, their feeling was that the process was, that they were up against, it was stacked against them as neighbors of a proposed process, and they felt that the minutes were not reflective of what had been said at some of the meetings, and
Whoa.
so, I don't know, I mean, generally
It should
people-
get back to us. I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't heard that, so maybe they need to dial the 911 for planning board on that one. No, I mean, it's a concern because I think the meetings are, making sure the neighbors are heard, and I mean, without a specific project.
Well, I don't want to get
Okay.
into names and things at this
Okay.
point, but I
Yeah.
just wondered, I mean, it is a process where neighbors do get upset, if they feel like things aren't going their way,
Yeah.
and I wondered, how you guys handle that.
Well, I mean, there's certainly an open meeting in it for every single case, neighbors in the room, please speak to the project and your concerns. If it didn't go their way, I can understand them being upset, but, I think trying to weigh, part of it is education. I think the realization, when you come before the planning board, you're seeking relief from the zoning, and so, it's weighing that and making sure that it seems like a reasonable request. I mean, sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. And some of it is going back in time and looking at other situations that are similar and how it's turned out and whether there's a bad precedent set for this kind of relief that's being sought. Unfortunately, a lot of neighbors only come to the issue that they're next to, rather than on a weekly basis, and I'm sure you see the same thing, that there are sort of institutional history about different ways we approach different relief. But, I mean, that should be brought to the board's attention, for sure, if someone feels like they weren't handled, but dealt with fairly, for
I'm
sure.
sure Selectman Goldstein, as a longtime planning board member.
I have a perspective on it anyway. Well, as you know, Linda, I served with Linda for many years on the planning board. And one of the things I kind of miss about the planning board is, you know, you guys, I think more than any other board in town, you had the finger on the pulse of what the trends were. And, you know, when every week a new bank was opening up in town,
Yeah,
the planning
that's
board
true.
knew it. When
Yeah.
you know, the move was to, I don't know, convert into a different number of units per building. You always saw what was going on.
Yeah, no, I think that's true.
So what are you seeing in terms of trends? Anything new?
Well,
to
you know,
report?
there are too many banks in town. I mean, I don't quite understand why, you know, what's generating this. I mean, we
They go
see a
where the
lot of
money is.
signage on banks, and there's new trends, you know, this 360 cafe business. I mean, we've had some issues in town of
Yogurt
people.
places.
Huh? Well,
Yogurt
there's, yeah, a
places.
lot of yogurt. There's a lot of yogurt, but there's more banks than yogurt. You know, the kind of technology trends, this 360 cafe is not really, it's a bank, but it's really not a bank. It's because it was,
I don't even know what
What's
that
that?
is. What is
360
that?
360 cafe. Do you know 360 cafe? Okay. Apparently, ING Bank was an online bank.
Yeah.
And it was bought by Capital One. And Capital One wants to come into that, the Coolidge Corner, it's the, you know, with the metal thing that's been without a business for years now. The Primo location in Coolidge Corner.
Oh, right on that corner there.
Right
It
on
was
the
a wine
corner that's
store
been
last-
blanked up.
yeah,
So
wine
that has
store.
been, that was taken over by some bank, and now Capital One Cafe. They're sort of approaching it from backwards. Most banks now have an online presence. Well, this bank had an online presence, but now wants a real street face. So the notion is that you can come in and talk to a bank person, but have a cup of coffee, and you can sit there all day with your computer, you know, and it doesn't matter. You can just sit there because they want a street presence. I know. I mean, we've had some problems mostly because, you know,
Well,
when you
sometimes
get.
there aren't enough seats at Starbucks, so.
Well, I guess so. Well, yeah, it's something like that, but there'll be a bank manager there. There is one that I took a picture of on Boylston Street in the back bay at the corner of Fairfield. And when they came toward us, one issue that we have a lot with big corporations or brands, they have branding teams. Well, I sort of think of the planning board as our Brookline branding team. And, you know, they will give you this notion that, well, their branding team has come up with this look and they really can't do anything about it. That's what you have to accept, right? That's what it has to look like on your street. Well, I think all of us on the board were in agreement that their branding team had come up with a pretty obnoxious facade. And you can see it in, you know, they're doing it on Boylston Street now. And, you know, we try to limit the colors a little bit. I mean, I guess we're kind of snobby, but, you know, there's sort of a limit to how much we want to look like a circus act or a carnival or, you know, look at me, which is basically what a lot of these corporations want to do. You know, the bigger the sign, the better, the more colors, you know, the flash and the pop. So, so that's one trend that I get, that's constant though, but you do see a lot of corporations coming in that, you know, come in with their branding that we have to sort of negotiate. Santander, is that how you pronounce that?
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, they wanted to paint most of their building on Route 9 red, which we didn't really want to have it all red. And we noticed, you know, we have to take
Considering that
pictures.
you're wearing red glasses and a red
Well,
sweater
it
today,
was-
I'm
it
surprised
was
to hear you
warm.
say that.
It was warm. I guess I shouldn't have brought that up, but, you know, the bigger the sign, the better. The more colors, you know, the flash and the pop. So, so that's one trend that I get. That's constant though, but you do see a lot of corporations coming in that, that, you know, come in with their branding that we have to sort of negotiate. if you look downtown for Santander, they have a nice sign that's all in silver. So obviously, it's not the case that they, have been able to convince everybody that they have to keep that image. We still have nail salons. I don't know. I
How
mean,
about
it's
residential?
all, you can see it around town too.
Residential, I think I thought of another example of a trend that we
Right.
identified was the snout nose
Right.
houses
When
and
we-
stuff.
and we
Like,
took care of
Seeing
that.
any trends on the residential side? Anything that we need?
Well,
to-
the tear downs are a little, they're still happening.
Yeah.
And, it's, I don't quite know how you get around that. I mean, it's upsetting, I think, for some neighborhoods that don't understand, or neighbors maybe, that don't understand the zoning code and what's allowed, And so if you come at it backwards, you can't really change the zoning or down zone without it appearing as a taking. So, how do you modify that? Do you put less restrictive things on it, more restrictive things like some sort of design review, so that there might be more neighborhood input, at least on what goes in, rather than the mass that goes in? You know what I mean? There's some specific cases I could talk to, but
There's one neighborhood, I think, that's going to come to town meeting with a warrant article, because they had some pretty massive stuff going in.
yeah. And it's, well, yeah. I mean, I'm surprised in some, actually, of our wealthier neighborhoods that there's now tear downs too. It's not just a little cape that may be sort of an odd infill. There's some very large homes being taken down, which is too bad, because I think there's a historic, pulse there that's being demolished, and the replacements are not too big a porte-cochere.
Thanks, Linda.
Yeah.
Thanks for all of your efforts for
It's
Yeah,
fun.
we
all these
appreciate
years.
your service and your willingness to do more. And we will be voting this pretty
Okay.
soon, I think, in the next couple of weeks. And
All right. Well, I've been working without pay since August with this appointment, so. It was a
No
joke.
pay. What happened?
Right, you got it.
Yeah. We'll call HR tomorrow morning, don't worry.
You've been serving that way too? I am.
Ken Lewis, Economic Development. We are very fortunate in Brookline that we have the services of many able people who keep the place running. We thank you all.
The previous applicant, I mean, it's amazing the people that live in Brookline.
It's
I mean,
true.
It's just, you found that out about being on America's Cup, but I mean, it's just mind-blowing, really. that I was there. Good luck.
Good evening.
Good to see you again.
I can't.
So tell us what you've been working on and why you want to keep doing it.
Well, yeah, EDAB's a great committee. It's, we've got a really, as Linda just mentioned, there's a lot of talented, smart people in Brookline, and we're very fortunate, and I appreciate the opportunity to work with a lot of them on EDAB. We've got a wonderful board that's got a nice collection of skills. If it was a consulting firm, it would bill out at a pretty good rate. We've got lawyers and bankers and architects and planners of all different types. So it's a great committee to work with, and I enjoy it. I've done it for about a decade now, and it's been terrific. It's been great to see the progress that's been made. I thought the efforts collectively of the town, including the leadership by the selectmen on the rezoning board for the Red Cab site, and how that's then progressed through the permitting process, and looks to be a project that was very much in keeping with all the original design goals and the neighborhood protection of the adjoining neighborhoods, as well as the obvious benefit of generating significant increases in commercial tax revenues. That's a great model, and I think I was very proud to be a part of that, and we look forward to seeing that to to completion and in the, hopefully in the near future. Brookline Place is, both Ken and Neil know, is an active process underway, and we look forward to seeing some positive resolution on that as well. That's a little bit longer time frame, I believe, but it's a very important project for the town.
I'd love to have your thoughts, and I don't want you to prejudge before the committee, but I'm hearing that the garage, the proposals are to make the garage a lot larger, which I would think from a aesthetic point of view might not be terribly attractive, but what do you see as the pros and cons?
It is, it's the fundamental issue. I think that our subcommittee on the finance side, working with Pam McKinney, I think at least speaking for myself, not for Neil and others, but we're fairly convinced that the requirement for full underground parking is not going to make the project feasible in the foreseeable future. And then the town needs to make some tough calls as to what we're willing to accept as part of that exchange. We believe that the parking garage footprint and the height would have to be increased to something like 7 to 8 floors to accommodate the required parking. It's currently a 4-story structure. I would argue that that's something, because of its position on the site and its visibility vis-a-vis Route 9 and the other areas, is a trade-off that's going to be worth it in the long term. I do think that the facade, as it faces the park area that's proposed to be created, and the walkway, the pedestrian walkway between Route 9 and the T-stop, that needs some particular attention and treatment with regard to the facade materials, and then some screening materials, particularly some vegetation and perhaps some other uses. There's been discussed some perhaps little performing arts stage or some other things there that might help soften that and make that an acceptable trade-off.
And also substantial streetscape improvements on Pearl Street are part of the package, perhaps. But just for the public's information, there's a Brookline Place advisory committee that Selectman Goldstein and I are co-chairing, looking at the Brookline Place potential project, and we've divided into 2 subcommittees, design, and Selectman Goldstein is heading that side of it, and then the finance side, which Mr. Lewis has been a key factor. Can you be a factor? Yeah, why not?
When's your next meeting, if people are interested?
February 5th.
Week from Wednesday, week from tomorrow, but it's 2 subcommittee meetings.
Right, we're restructuring it to have 2 subcommittee meetings, then we'll have another meeting after that of the full.
So people should check the town calendar for the 5th.
Right, and the big issue, as Selectman Daley said, is from a design perspective, is the size of the parking lot. And that's currently the focus of the design team.
Okay, questions?
Well, just follow up. First of all, thanks, Ken. Ken did some numbers modeling
Right.
just for us last week that were helpful in our discussions with the developer on Monday, so thank you for that. The next step after the red cab and after Brookline Place, hopefully something gets worked out, in my mind, is the rest of Lower Boylston Street, the rest of the area in town that I think is most blighted and most in need of new vision. And you and I have talked about it at times in the past, but anything you've got up there cooking about what we can do to improve that part of town? I look at Newton and the massive amount of development that's gone on and the addition that's made to their tax base, and then I look just not even a mile down the road at what we've got going on between Cypress Street and Washington Street, and it doesn't seem fair.
It's a challenge, yeah. I think the one, as a lot of people know, the depth of the lots there is such that it's going to always limit the ability to do a lot with certain of those parcels, and then it's also very fractionalized ownership, as you know. So it's a real challenge. I think that'll have to be done in more small, discrete projects that are going to be more customized users. Probably now, if in long term the automobile uses on the other side, if there's some assembly there and whatnot, that could potentially permit a larger scale development. But that land basis would be quite high, and I don't think the market would be there in the near term for that. But I think on the for those smaller buildings, it is going to be tough to do any kind of major assembly because of the depth of the site. So I think we're going to have to take that in bits and pieces.
Okay, thank
I
you.
wish I had a magic formula for you.
I wish I did too. I've been looking for it for a long time.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming in. We like to it's a good way for us to find out what our various committees are up to when we have people come back in, even though they've been a long-time member.
Right.
But we appreciate your service and your willingness to continue, so thank you. We'll take a
pleasure.
vote on this in the next couple of weeks, probably.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so...
Empty room, though, I'll tell you.
Well, we are competing tonight with the president giving the State of the Union address. So I'm happy that anybody's here. Thank you. So, Mr. Cronin.
Yes.
Are you here to talk to us? So we've updated the Selectmen's objectives a little bit. I think each of us added something. I know the one I added was that I realized it didn't say anything about the fact that Brookline is an age-friendly city, and we want to continue to work on that. Selectman Waschinsky, you had a couple adds?
Yeah, one project that I've taken on is trying to strengthen and expand the subway system in Brookline. So I
Which is
suggest-
the rental bicycles. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Selectman Goldstein.
Yeah, I added some continued efforts on the Brookline Place project that we were just talking about, as well as reminding us on setting our sights on the goal of more licenses towards our quota so as not to artificially limit the growth of the restaurant industry in town, which benefits both streetscape and local options taxes as a revenue source. So I wanted to refocus us on that objective. Otherwise, I think the list is a good one, and I look forward to working towards those goals.
Yeah, I think we discussed the rest of the list last week, so I don't think we have to go over all of it, but it's touches on also, everything from the Override Study Committee to working toward diversity, reducing energy use, expanding technology use, and some public safety items, and so there's some zoning code enforcement. And I think this is one you've been working on, Selectman Goldstein, the small commercial property tax exemption.
Yeah, it's one that I talked to our legislative representatives about once or twice a year, but it just has never seemed to quite get the traction that it needs. They know it's out there, and someday somebody else will discover this too, and then we'll be prime. But
I do think it's a good idea.
it's a great idea, but it's just not.
So I'm backing
It's
you.
not one that, what we need is some other municipalities to join the idea, and if any of them are listening, call me and I'll brief you on it.
And I notice explore options to rectify inequities inherent in the Norfolk County structure.
Oh, yes.
I like that one.
I'm working
Yeah.
on that one too, but
This is, as people who follow us regularly will know, that we feel that we are forced to pay quite a substantial amount each year toward Norfolk County liabilities, including the agricultural high school, which
Yeah.
is, I understand, a wonderful place, but very, very few Brookline students go there. And yet-
Zero at the moment.
Oh, I thought there was one.
Not anymore.
Was.
And yet that institution is taking on substantial debt, which we will be on the hook for, as well as the other Norfolk County communities. Meanwhile, our neighbors in Middlesex and some of the other counties which have been dissolved don't have to pay some of the legacy liabilities, like the post-employment benefits, et cetera, for their employees. The state has assumed that. So we, as taxpayers, are paying Middlesex's obligations and other counties, and Norfolk's.
Well, one thing that may be forcing this matter to its crisis is that the finances of the county are not too good at the moment, and they're operating with structural deficits. There's a number of bills, there's 4 different competing bills on Beacon Hill right now to help them with their finances, and 2 of those bills would actually cure our problem at the same time. So the worse their economics get, the more the chance that we're going to get some
Well, excellent.
resolution on it.
Let us all know, and we'll go testify when those bills come up.
I did it last year, but
So, and where does this get printed eventually, Mr. Cronin?
Financial plan.
The financial plan, okay. So, any further discussion? I'm going to move favorable action then on the updated version of the Selectmen's objectives for the coming year. All in favor, Selectman Goldstein?
aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye. That's unanimous.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. So I told Mr. Kleckner that we would get done in record time tonight. I admit, we had a very short agenda, so it was not entirely through my doing that we went through it so fast.
So
But-
are we adjourned?
We are adjourned,
All
yes.
right, that's good. Thank you.